Hi and welcome everybody. My name is Pete Sacco. I am the president and founder of a company in Oakland, New Jersey. I'd like to refer to it as the Lesser Oakland. We are basically builders of data centers. And so there's two divisions of PTS, people who design and build data center facilities, and then the managed IT and managing them, so whether it's managed IT on-prem or co-location facilities. And I have some guests with me, so some that I've known for a long time and some that I've recently made acquaintance, but their really expertise is in cybersecurity. And so I want to introduce first Yasir Ali. And Yasir, why don't you give an introduction to yourself and what Polymer is all about, and take it away.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Pete. Nice meeting you, everyone. Yasir Ali, founder of Polymer. We are data governance / data privacy, or as we like to call it, data loss prevention product for the cloud, specifically cloud-hosted applications, where as companies are moving more and more to the cloud, what we're seeing on the news right now is more ransomware, more attacks, more exfiltration information, and no control over employee actions in terms of how easy it is to remove data from hypothetical on-prem company accounts to external areas. And our tool basically protects some of those things happening with a machine-enabled, fully automated solution.
Great. Thanks, Yasir. John, why don't you take it away?
Sure. John Gomez. I'm the CEO and founder of Sensato Cybersecurity Solutions. We're what we would call a full stack cybersecurity firm, meaning we provide a software platform. On top of that, we have a 24/7 cybersecurity tactical operations center, and we also have a library of widgets that we include. The other side of our business, we work very much in doing risk assessments, penetration testing, incident response, and tabletop simulations and threat hunting. On my own, outside my activities with Sensato, involved in the development of cyber munitions and cyber warfare. So yeah, that's me, that's Sensato. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. So again, Pete Sacco, I'm going to serve as the moderator here, being the least smart guy in the room. And so I'm going to ask a bunch of questions of these guys. And so just to be fair, John and I have known each other for quite a while now. In fact, we work pretty closely together. John's company, Sensato, is very abled in the especially the healthcare and medical and hospital industries, and PTS has a partnership with them. We're in the small and medium-sized businesses where my managed IT lives. We really offer two levels of managed IT, one at the device level and one more in the posturing. And I'm sure we're going to learn more about Nightingale and John's capabilities around there. So first, I want to thank everybody for attending today because as we all know, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so that's why we decided to put this together now. And really, I'm going to divide up what we're going to talk about today into the three areas that I believe are of cybersecurity. First, I want to ask some questions around ransomware specifically, and what is the clear and present risk that is going on today. Talk about some of the magnitudes of losses and common methods of attack that we've been seeing that are going on. I then want to migrate to talk about how do we protect ourselves. And so series of questions around people, technology, and perhaps operations. We'll round the corner and what do you do if you are attacked? How do you, what could you do to prepare yourself for it? Running playbooks and simulations. And then we'll finish up with some next steps, and we'll talk about some of the assessments that we all offer to help you. And so, first, I just want to talk about some of the clear and present risks that are out there right now. So John, we'll start with you. What are some of the trends that we're seeing in cybersecurity, specifically ransomware, going on right now? And has it changed in the last day, week, month, year?
So so ransomware is continually evolving and obviously a clear and present danger in terms of what we see. And in regards to evolution of ransomware, we have seen not just the tactics evolve, but also the technology to some extent, but more so the tactics. And what I mean by that is traditionally ransomware was something that you went after. You targeted an end user, you sent them an email, you did something, they clicked on something, and then you launched the attack. We still see that, and the majority of the attacks do that. But we also now are seeing where the attackers are really sending an email or sending something or breaking into the server infrastructure, and then they're kind of being patient. So you click on something, the attack doesn't actually take place immediately. They get into the network, they catalog your assets, they figure out what you have on the network. They typically will steal some data. I'll tell you a little funny story about that. Well, not so funny for who it happened to, but maybe funny for us. And so they're taking their time to learn what you have. And part of that is they're beginning to use what we call exploitation tactics. What I mean by that is this: they comb through your data, and they launch the ransomware attack at some point in the future. When that attack launches, if you don't pay the ransom, for example, we work, as Peter mentioned, in hospitals a lot, they will call patients, or they will call the employees, and they will say something to the extent of, if it's an employee, hey, do you have a son or daughter that goes to so-and-so school? And they know this because they'll track you on social media. And at that point, what they'll do is they'll tell you, if you want to see your daughter or son again, you should tell your employer to pay the ransom that was just launched against your organization. So they're really getting very much into exploit. The quick funny story I'll tell you is we did have a situation where an organization got hit by ransomware. They tried to negotiate with the attackers, which is something we do recommend in terms of the price of the ransom. And the attacker said, no, we're not negotiating. We know you can afford the $1.7 million ransom that they had asked for. And the way we know that is because we have a copy of your cyber liability insurance policy. And then they sent an image of the cyber liability insurance policy binder page, the cover page, and showed that you're insured for $1.7 million against ransomware. So the tactics are definitely changing. It's not what it was even 6 months, 8 months ago. They're becoming much, much more creative and effective at what they do. So.
Yeah, John and I, you both always said, right, the bad guys have the always responding to what we throw up as an obstacle. And they always seem to be one step ahead of increasing their capabilities to do it. I'm sure we're going to get to later on, though, but the truth of the matter is lack of sophistication is still by far the number one way that people are getting in. So to that end, Yasir, you tend to be on more of the cloud-centric side of cybersecurity and protection. And so what I would like from your perspective is, I could tell you from me as a data center builder, one common thread across small and medium-sized businesses is that we want to be all in the cloud. And what the reality is they're saying across large and medium-sized businesses, they're saying, I want to be hybrid. We're starting to see evolve now is edge deployments wherever I have people, technology, and or process, large data warehouses that are either large data centers or co-location, and then cloud enablement, cloud where necessary. So my first question, with cloud storage, how do you lock it down? How do you protect the cloud? And can we even do the same sorts of things with cloud-based data that we're doing with what John alluded to of protecting servers?
Yeah, no, so like going back about 11 years ago when AWS first started, you saw cloud infrastructure pieces like a server on demand or databases on demand. Those are the basic building blocks. And over the course of the last 10 years, companies like Snowflake and other type of databases have kind of come online and providing kind of all-in-one solution wrapped up with security, bringing your own keys and things like that. So the reason to give this like 2-second history is because what I've noticed, I ran a consulting business for like 10 years around a lot of these installations. What we found was a lot of organizations did not have the expertise in terms of managing some of these cloud assets, and they used to bring in consultants and, okay, let's move to Amazon and let's move some of our old files into S3 buckets and then store them there, and that'll be a first point. And kind of not realizing some of the controls around proxies or IAM policies were just blatantly incorrect, or were modified incorrectly, or were not being maintained properly with the employees leaving or coming in, or with your partners. And so what that kind of we've seen the effect of that, obviously, with a lot of these assets kind of being very vulnerable. And that has obviously given cloud a bad name in terms of where things stand right now. And now we've seen in the last few years where companies basically are saying, okay, we don't want any of that. Let's go to Azure cloud because that's secure, and we're going to rent the space, not necessarily own it ourselves. So we'll pay a little extra premium and just go with a vendor like Oracle or Snowflake or Amazon or even GCP, I guess. And so we're seeing that switch. Except what's happening with that is the expense is going up. Employees you still cannot hire fast enough, especially in legacy businesses. It's very hard to attract talent which is cloud native or cloud proficient. So you have to kind of retool the skill set, which is frankly never done properly or done very successfully, not as commonly as can be. And that is kind of creating this need where we see in the marketplace is a lot of companies are now kind of moving their workloads over to hosted applications. So that's where kind of SaaS comes in. Like, okay, let's move everything to GitHub, our code bases, or ticketing system. We're now going to maintain our ServiceNow install, which is on-prem. We're going to kind of do it on the hosted side. Or we're going to do a Google Workspace and kind of do our email, storage, chats, everything in one place. So, which in some way gives you some amount of safety. But what we are seeing now, the derivative effect of that downstream, which is happening, is even that is causing or showing cracks in terms of holes which are opening up in those environments. In terms of people sharing files in Google Drive with links which are public, not locking those files down with external parties, or they have code bases which have secret keys just sitting out there, and those code bases are being checked in or being merged in with public repositories or repositories which are kind of opened up by mistake or whatever not. And they're not controls over kind of being able to even have a handle if someone is doing something wrong. So sitting like kind of stepping back for 1 second, and the old paradigm of technology used to be IAM policies, where firewall was the holy grail, and everything under the firewall, as long as you have access to a given application, given folder, you're good to go and do whatever you want to do. In the SaaS world is kind of where organizations are still thinking about IAM policies and permissioning of access. Except in SaaS land, the way the work happens is around collaboration, and you need more people on the platform and start using these platforms for work to be effective in the cloud. And that's kind of where IAM policies in general needs a rethink, and the security posture arising from that is something which is still in infancy as an internal kind of skill set for most organizations.
Yeah. I mean, so as a wrap up, we have both now cloud and on-prem technologies. So we've actually made it more complex to protect ourselves. We need actually different knowledge sets to be able to protect each side. Just out of curiosity, from your perspective, have you seen the number of clients that are paying the ransom increase or decrease? Or let me phrase it differently. How many people are able to protect themselves from a ransomware versus not protect themselves? And then once they're caught, how many people recover off of the ransomware without paying the fine, and how many people there? Just general. I know we can't share particulars, but where do we see the trends of that? Yeah. John, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I can tell you from our perspective, and we do get involved in a lot in ransomware response, but I would say of the cases we know of and work with directly, probably about 95% of people pay the ransom. There's a small subset that do not, but you're in for a long road. Another thing to know is that a ransomware attack, typically you measure recovery in terms of months. So if you're hit and you don't pay, you're challenged. You're probably going to be out of service for several months,
right?
Without access to your systems. Today's actually, kind of a hallmark day, and I didn't know if I was going to bring this up or not, but I will. And then maybe some of you have already seen this, but yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article that, at least here in the United States, the first death of a person attributed to a ransomware attack had occurred. And that is a baby that was unfortunately died in Spring Hill Hospital. Several months ago, there was a ransomware attack. Because of the ransomware attack, they couldn't provide adequate care for this child, and the child died. So it wasn't a direct attack against a medical device. It just was an attack against the entire hospital. So there are really, really serious consequences. But we see most people do pay the ransom. And the ransom numbers are also increased. The amount of ransom is really high. You're talking typically six figures and higher in terms of paying that.
And then the added kind of like, and I think John can add to this some more, is like, we'll talk about this later, but the knock-on effect is you get hacked once or have a ransomware once, you try to go and get your cyber insurance policy renewed for the next year, you're basically capped out. Maybe you can do it one more time. If it happens again, you're completely capped out. So the control or the mitigating factor around cyber insurance, which is a corollary to all this, is something which companies cannot even count on as such, especially where it's a multi-million-dollar policy. The amount of the onus on the customer or the medical provider is becoming higher and higher, where even if you try to go claim your policy amount, there's so many clauses in there in terms of what are the controls, have you taken care of all the controls which are in the best of your judgment, which is a legal kind of term in many cases. Is what does that even mean? And that is being contested pretty heavily in the court. So this is something which most companies, if they're not, should be like having like some sort of a fund on the side, which needs to kind of get capped out as an insurance policy just to pay some of these things.
Yeah, I want to stay on time. So that's a perfect segue right there, right? Because, all right, I think we've scared everybody, right? We know it's a clear and present danger in the community right now. It's getting more complex to do it, not less complex. The stakes are being raised. Insurance, insurance is only going to carry you so far. You're going to have to posture yourself to prevent these more and more. So how do I protect myself if I am a company today? And I really want to start with the technology side, because John, when you and I met, that was the first thing I noticed. For the beauty of the world we live in today is you could be a small business with a great idea, and I don't think ever before in history can you build a great idea into a great company and a great product. So I want to focus on the technology thing first. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how Sensato postures itself to help protect its clients, and what have you developed to do that? So how's that for a tee up?
Yeah, thank you. There's a variety of things we do. I mean, we have what's known as a full stack solution. I know that sounds kind of ominous or maybe a little gray, but what that simply means is we come in and we provide our own software, which is known as Sensato Nightingale, and that's composed of three modules: a compliance module, a detection module, and a response module. I won't go into each one of those, but it is fully integrated. And the real idea there is that most organizations invest and spend a lot of time deploying cybersecurity solutions, whether it's a small company or very large multinational organization, but they never really get it fully deployed. They don't have the resources, they don't have the techniques or the talent, and for a variety of reasons. So we've really tried to focus on how do we get an organization up with a fully integrated security platform in a very short amount of time. And so for us, we can have most organizations up and running in a matter of days. On top of that, we include 24/7 monitoring. We built a security operations center that is manned 24/7. It's a very specialized security operations center. Since we work with hospitals and other critical infrastructure agencies, we work a lot on how do we deal with very serious attacks. And then on top of that, we've created a library that we call widgets, which are basically 50 templates or so that are policies and procedures that organizations can customize so that they have the right policies and procedures in place. And that's what we mean by full stack. And so we're able to deploy that, and then we're able to integrate with other areas such as cloud security providers and data protection providers. So we don't do it all, but we do create that backbone, that framework, that then once you have that up and running, you have the ability to detect attacks, respond to attacks, reduce liability, increase defensibility. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we go about supporting people.
That's great. And Yasir, how about from your perspective, from that cloud perspective, what technologies and tools do you use to help protect your clients?
Yeah, our focus really is as companies move more and more to cloud-hosted applications, third-party applications. I'm talking when you're using Zoom and you have a large group of people, you're sharing files within Zoom in a company. You are in Google Drive or Gmail, you're sending stuff externally, getting a bunch of incoming emails which are related to HIPAA data necessarily. or you could be using a chat platform like Teams or Slack or other such hosted systems, or Zendesk or Jira or whatever. So essentially, our solution is what's called a virtual compliance officer, which is essentially an automated way of looking at sensitive data traffic and be able to remove it in real time if it's at risk. So if there are, you can design policies around, like, if someone is sharing a sensitive file externally, I want those public links to expire within 24 hours, for example, within Google Drive. Any of your employees does that. If there's some file shared in your chat platform, file can remain intact, but anything within the file having sensitive data can be zapped out. So there's a lot of automations that built in to be able to, without creating operational overhead, be able to reduce some of the risk associated with having surface area of sensitive data over these platforms, which could be sitting in people's homes, living rooms, on unprotected Wi-Fi, or even within company premises.
I think automation is going to have to be the key, right? Because we're all being forced to do more with less. And unless we're able to build automation into all these platforms, that we trust the technologies that we're deploying to keep us safer, long gone is the day where I could fill a room full of people in order to protect ourselves. So with that, let's talk about people and training. And so, John, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes companies are making today in prepping to, combat a ransomware attempt, and what can we do differently?
Yes, so a couple of weeks ago, we saw a report from the New Zealand Cybersecurity Center, which is their national incident response center, and they put out a report which I read through it about ransomware specifically. And one of the things that caught my eye in that report is that 87% of all ransomware attacks that they studied over the last 5 years use very basic attack methodologies. These aren't things that attackers are doing like the James Bond Minority Report, Mr. Robot kind of stuff. They're really basic attacks, but they get in and they're effective. And I think so that kind of talks to one of the most, I would say there's two important things you need to do. One, based on that data, is you got to go defend against the basics. You got to patch your servers. You've got to, address vulnerabilities that you detect, assuming you're doing vulnerability scans, and hopefully you are. You've got to protect and lock down your perimeter. You've got to get rid of old software. These are the things that allow attackers to be successful. Actually working with organizations like PTS, this is where there's value to get an organization in that can help you lock down your environment and manage the environment. But that's really kind of the most important investment you can make, is get your environment, whether it's on-prem or cloud, locked down, and clean it up. And the second thing is really educating your end users and getting them to understand, what does a ransomware attack look like? How does it actually happen? How do you contribute to the attack taking place? I think those are my two big kind of preachy moments, if you will.
Yeah, and yep. So Yasir, how about you? How do you, when you're training people and you're implementing this and you're doing this with people, how do you measure the success? How do you measure the success of how well you're building security processes and your involvement of your people in these?
Yeah, I mean, there were some statistics we like to quote, is like as little as 7% of your employee base is responsible for like 87 or 80+% of risk associated with people just doing stupid stuff. Security is a people problem first, technology problem second, as we know. Most of these attacks are happening because of people either accidentally doing things or just being sloppy about, or just being pure stupid about things. So this has been a perennial thing, not just from the product days where I sit right now, but even from my prior days in consulting, where the measurement of security training and how much of it is being actually going inside is sort of like a black hole, which has been there. So we have, discussed with the various companies that come to mind in the security training space, such as Hook Security is one. It's a small startup, but they're like, for example, not to pitch them in or anything, but the approach they've taken is like they've done funny videos or things which can stick or resonate with you, and be able to then deploy those videos when someone does something wrong. So we have been trying to think of some of those ideas in terms of behavioral techniques, because for us, from our vantage point, since we connect into applications where the usage is pretty high, and we can catch people sharing files externally or keeping sensitive data at risk, how do you kind of like nudge them at the time when the thing happens? And we've seen effects of that reduce the amount of repeat patterns by the same individual, at least by tremendous large amounts if you do it right when they do something wrong. So it's definitely a work in progress. Security training, unfortunately, has not kept up with the times. It's still a quarterly exercise where you do a checkoff and move on. But John said it right. Like it's just very simple. The simple stuff first. Like that is something people forget. Changing password, MFA, just the basic stuff.
Yeah, people indeed, right? Just think how easy IT and cybersecurity if we could take people out of the equation, right? But John, it was interesting when we're deploying Sensato and we're doing the honeypots. I remember learning from you early on that it was as important to put them on the inside of the network as outside of the network, right? Because of a lot of the attacks coming from within. We keep reading in newspapers, right, that the latest great cyber breach is usually from some disgruntled employee who just knows the right place, the biggest vulnerability. Can you talk a little bit more about, from the operational standpoint of deploying that? You had the talk last week with Hector, and a guy came from the black hat side of hacking, and honeypots was the one thing that kind of scares them. So why don't you talk about it a little bit? I think that's important for people to understand what that means from both the external side of the network and the internal side of the network.
Yeah, and so for those of you that don't know about the talk that Peter is referencing, Hector Monsegur was one of the founders of LulzSec and Anonymous. So he's a pretty famous attacker. He has quite a reputation in terms of his ability to break into systems. If you want to see that video, just let us know, let Peter know, and or others, and we'll get you a link to that. But we talked to Hector about what scares you. You get into a network, what is that security solution or tool that scares you? And his response was basically honeypots, right? Because they don't really do anything except set off an alert. They're not trying to analyze you. It's like a mousetrap, right? If you touch them, they're going to go off. We offer honeypots with our solution, so we're obviously a little biased, but they are a great tool to detect 0 days, to detect movement in your network, whether it be from an insider threat or an external threat. But deploying them inside your network is a really great tactic, just because they do give you this kind of last line of defense capability.
And not only that, but the automation is key, right? The idea of now being able to look at those and correlate the tremendous amounts of data that flows through your that you monitor on a daily basis to see who's hitting what ports, how many times and why, and being able to make those automated inferences today, as opposed to years ago when you kind of had to visually see it and kind of recognize that there's something nefarious going on. And today you have launched a wide array of tools to be able to do that, and then start backtracing, usually to an instigator that we can't do anything about. But at the very least, at least we know that we're protecting ourselves, and we chase them down a rabbit hole. How about you, Yasir?
One thing I'll add there, like big fan of honeypots, and what John is doing is like pretty remarkable in that space also. So we've taken the playbook around some of the more insider threat perspective, where putting in the concept of honeypots into SaaS platforms. So for example, code repos with files having patient data labels or other stuff in there where with appropriate training, no one on the inside should be touching it, or people only trying to get into it are doing it for the wrong reasons. And we've kind of been experimenting with this stuff within Google Drive and other SaaS infrastructures in terms of how do we replicate the honeypot concept into something which is more user-driven. Still yet to be seen what the progress is going to be, but definitely having these booby traps across the enterprise, not just from the cloud infrastructure or infrastructure perspective, but also within the third-party apps themselves, is what we're trying to marry together.
Yeah. Great. So I want to shift gears yet again, and I want to talk about now, help people understand what do you do if you're attacked. And so I'll start with a little story. So I was CEO of an organization, I'm not going to mention where, and it was many years ago, and it was my first experience of having your entire network crippled through a ransomware attack. Luckily, we had a pretty able team, and it was back in the day when you could recover off of backups, right? Remember when we used to be able to recover off of backups and actually get in, and it still took us all day to get back up and running, but we were able to get back up and running. And it was something as benign as somebody just clicking on the wrong link in a wrong place. And so, and I remember, John, you and I one time were sitting down and we were talking and we're like, how readily available is ransomware today? And I think we just Googled it, and we found like ransomware for hire within 5 seconds of being people that we can hire from anywhere and do that. So let's just, John, from your perspective, for the gal who's standing there and realize that they've just been attacked, what should they do first?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is disconnect or get disconnected from the rest of your network, assuming it's something on your laptop or desktop. Ultimately, the bottom line is you want to contain the attack, right? That's your first thing, is stop it from continuing to spread. The faster you can do that, the better. We actually work off of a model where we try to, when we're training people to do incident response and we're working through incident response, we try to teach people that you have 14 minutes or less to respond to a serious attack. And so we work on that premise. So the first thing is contain the attack. And yeah, that would be the first thing I would tell someone.
Yeah, I could tell you that when we had that attack, of the thousands of files that we had, I think we were able to contain it down to the first 127 that were encrypted. And even that 127, before we basically detached from the network and stopped the spread of the virus, it still took all day just to recover files off of there and forget about disaster, DR and the backups and rollbacks to point in time. And right, that was a nightmare just getting back operational off of that. But I agree 100%, stop the attack as soon as possible. How about your perspective on that, Yasir? What do you think, and what we're basically talking about is building that playbook. What's your take on what happens first when your customer is attacked and building a playbook for that?
I mean, from our perspective, we obviously are not in the front line as much as obviously John is from the infrastructure perspective. But for us, we're looking at the physical assets themselves, like the actual customer files, copies of invoices, bank wire informations, healthcare records, which are recorded in images or stored in large object stores, for example, S3 buckets and stuff. So for us, we always, recommend already removed upfront the blast radius, so to speak, by reducing the amount of people having access to that in general. Like only the CTO has access, or it requires 2 different authentications, 2 different mobile phones before you can even get into a service or a folder. So it's those are obviously window dressings in the scheme of things when the whole infrastructure is kind of going down. But we feel that at the minimum, these are records which are, if exposed externally, can leave a bad mark in terms of the fines that you might be responsible for. If a social security number has a cost of, let's say, we're just talking to someone today on some of the cost estimates for cyber insurance, and a social security number will cost you, from a regulatory perspective, $137, let's say, give or take. And let's say if you have a whole image, patient data file image, which was stored on a SaaS platform, which is leaked, or SharePoint environment, let's say, what would that cost be in terms of what that fine would be, or the reputational damage? So that's the kind of when we kind of engage with our customer, those are the perspectives we bring into the table in terms of how, like, if you have those kind of files, encrypt them, and having the key, which is rotating, not just one single encryption key. You have a CSEC, which rotates, so AWS KMS, rotating key policy over time, and or if you're using some platforms like HashiCorp. So that's all I can say.
Great. And so in keeping with the idea of what do you do when you're attacked, I'm going to share another personal story. Now, John, I know that you come from a law enforcement background as well. And my son, as you know, is a police officer. And dare I say, it comes down to practice. And I swear to God, there's a point to this story. I remember when he became a police officer, I was amazed at how little live gunfire training there was to become a police officer. And as you know, we're both avid shooters, come from having put thousands of rounds into thousands of targets, and we're both pretty good at it today and in a triage situation. Dare I say he's probably better at it today because he's now gotten the training in and outside the force thanks to it. But it comes down to simulated training. It comes down to practice. And so most people are usually not prepared because they haven't practiced being prepared. So let's talk about that for a second. Give me build me a story around when you're doing a simulation for a client. John, what does it look like for a client to run through that simulation and how to practice the response?
Yeah, I mean, so when we do tabletop simulations, we typically will take somebody through, a scenario that's specific to them, right? What is important in their environment to preserve. We try to understand the tipping points and where is it that things start to break down. And then from that, you're able to make adjustments to your incident response plan and put that together. We've done things where we've, defaced somebody's website. We'll take a copy of their website and we'll assume attackers got to it, and we'll really make it a very bad look, right, for that organization. And suddenly now you have to deal with that branding problem or that confidence problem from your customers, or internal attacks, right? We can replicate those and simulate them and walk through what would you do and, where that tipping point is. One thing I think Yasir was making the point, and I think this is really important, and even this on tabletop simulations, and Peter, when you ask me, like, what do you do if there's a ransomware attack? I think the most important thing to keep in mind is incident response starts before the attack, right? Putting in place things like the security practices that Yasir was talking about, putting in place tabletop simulations and practicing. That's really kind of what you need to think about, right? Is you're preparing for the attack. So when if it does happen, you're able to respond and you have the right technologies in place. Versus just all of a sudden hoping for the best and seeing what happens from there.
Yeah, sir. Do you often advise clients and help build those simulations and preparing the teams to verify, unwanted intrusions and things like that? What is your role in that preparedness, if you will?
Yeah, no, we don't. Thank God, I don't have the stomach for it, to be honest. I'm an old Wall Street guy. Our focus really is around locking down PHI data, where especially for organizations who don't realize where it is. It's quite funny. We do these assessments, for example, around like different platforms, and the common answer is no, we don't have any sensitive data on our chat platform or on our ticketing system, or no one is sending files. Everyone is trained to send it through secure mail, for example, externally. So it's not just you, it's your partners or the partner's partners. So there's a compounding effect of the data which you are responsible for from your patients, from your customers, from your transactions. And what does that posture look like? So we do train in terms of training. Well, we put in place technologies to be able to make sure that those things can be locked down as they happen. Because if someone is, what we've noticed is if an employee is sloppy around sharing patient data internally with someone on a public forum, let's say, or a ticket or a Jira ticket or through a chat platform, that probably is the same person who's not changing his password on a monthly basis or doing a 2MFA or has the LastPass closed out, for example, locked out of the computer. And if you're not enforcing those things actively within your environment, this is your weak link. This is the weak link where threat actors get in from normally and create chaos. So it's, as John said, like it's a 360 type kind of work where you are basically the tools which your employees are using. Is there governance around them, and what are the controls you have to be able to monitor and be able to remove those risks as much as possible without incurring too much operational overhead.
That's perfect. And you've all day long, you've given me the next exact roadmap of to where I wanted to go, because I wanted to talk about next steps now, right? And assessing your own maturity level. But before I do that, you made me think of something. John, many years ago when we met, I remember you telling me a story that, in your storied career, you were sitting in a cybersecurity conference with the likes of all the three-letter people, the CIA and the NSA and New York Cyber Command and New Jersey Cyber Command. And it was probably maybe one of the first early times that you were ever in with that level of cybersecurity knowledge. And you were amazed that the conversation came down to password changes and it was that realization that people want to think this is a far more sophisticated attack profile than actually it is, and how simply, with a basic level of knowledge and a basic level of process and a basic level of training, they could prevent and be prepared for perhaps as high as 90% of the attacks that are out there in the industry, right? Because do you agree that the vast majority of the people attacking are opportunists and not, they're opportunists and not necessarily malicious trying to take down the world?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, another way to look at it, we have a term for most attackers, right? 90% of attackers are what we call script kiddies, right? They're just have a basic, they take somebody else's code, they watch YouTube, whatever they're doing, they're not, when we think of like NSA level attacks or going after, nuclear power plants and shutting down the grid, that's the 10%. And they are real and they're very serious. And yes, there are nation state attackers, but for the most part, again, we keep going back to this theme. The attacks aren't that sophisticated and the talent levels aren't that sophisticated. They just find the opportunity. Here's something all of you can do that are watching this. Google the word Shodan, Shodan. Actually, I'll tell you what, Peter, if you want to go onto Yasir, I'll try to bring this up on my screen and I can share it and we'll just see. We'll do something really simple.
Great. While John's working on that, I want to share another story. We saw a distinct, the federal government has stayed out of helping enterprises with respect to ransomware and attacks right up until we saw the pipeline be attacked. We saw a distinct change in the posture of the federal government of how it's treating nation state attacks and even, organized attacks. And so I think that's a good thing. Yasir, talk to me about, what your perspective is on how you assess the maturity level of, a client, and as to how you assess what you can do to help them as a next step.
Yeah, no, this is just coming from customers who are far more intelligent and have seen more, like CISOs I work with, and some of the simplest things are everyone having a LastPass or password
protection program.
Password protection program on everyone's employees' desktops. There are very easy ways of administrating them. That if someone's desktop LastPass or password protection program is not on or switched on, they can be literally they cannot work until they switch it back on and reset their password. And we are applying policies where everyone needs to change their password every month, every 2 weeks. And have encrypted password. That's like the most basic thing. And then obviously, in terms of two-factor for as many applications as you can get into, unfortunately, a lot of homemade applications or legacy applications, you don't have that option. But the VPN, which you connect into, or some of the other environments which you use to have your employees connect into your internal environment, that needs to be having password kind of changes or IP-based protection, where if someone is sitting in Bermuda, they need to tell you they're in Bermuda, otherwise they will be locked out. So geographic kind of limitations of who can access your environment. I mean, those are very basic and very easy and cheap solutions now available in the market, and it doesn't take much to kind of get them going. So, I mean, for us, that's like the number one in terms of like kind of getting started. And obviously, once you kind of get on the platforms themselves, there's lots of things you can do or automate some of those things, with platforms like ours or just manually yourself.
Great. Before we round the corner of finishing up here, I want to tell everybody that's in attendance, if you have any questions, use the chat, right? So go on the bottom of the screen, hit chat, put some questions in there, start framing them. Even if we don't get them, within the time frame here, you please reach out to any one of us, if you have any questions, but put it in the chat. We'll try to answer some of that. But John, go ahead. Why don't you pull up Shodan?
Yeah. So anybody here, anyone, this is not some weird, secret site on the dark web. This is on the regular web, right? You can go to shodan.io. You can use an account or not. It's free. And I'm just going to show you what this website does. It's like a Google for computer devices. It goes out and it tries to find things with a chip, a computer chip, anything that has a computer chip that's on the internet. And so when we talk about locking down the environments and doing the basics and really putting in place proper controls, hopefully this will help you. You can show this to your leadership and go, here's why we need to do this. If you click on Explore, you'll see out here that it categorizes things. And you can go through, and some of this stuff, this is live. None of us on this panel talked about doing this, so we're just taking a shot here. But you can explore for your IP address. You can put in a type of system, like you can type in Palo Alto, or you can type in Cisco, whatever you want, and it'll find everything related to that. So if I click here, I'm gonna get a list of every webcam that is improperly configured, whether it's in your house or in your office or wherever it is, and is literally exposed to the internet. And I can link down and kind of try to, go in and see, like, can I find any here in the US or wherever it may be? And then if I click on these, and I'm a little scared to click because I don't know what I'm going to get. So if I go here, I can see these are the open ports. It can tell me exactly what this webcam is. Now, you can actually, on some of these, I don't know if this one has it, you can actually go down and see the webcam. You can take control of it. I don't think we can do that on this one that I picked, and I really don't want to do that.
Thank God.
Well, actually, here, I'll do this real quick. So here, if I click here, I can probably link to that webcam. I don't know if it'll come up or not, but in the interest of privacy, won't do that. Here on the left side of the screen, you can see all the vulnerabilities for that webcam. Now, I'm using a webcam example, but this could be a VPN server. It could be your portal, your website, your partner systems, whatever it is. And so this is why I think we're all on this call very passionate about get the right controls in place, get the right systems in place, because the level of sophistication the attackers need is not that high. And with tools like this, they can find you pretty easily, whether you're a very small organization, because sometimes we hear, well, I'm so small, who would come after me, all the way up to very large corporations. I'll give you a story on a small organization kind of thing. There was a case we worked on out of Kentucky where a small business, which was basically a husband and wife who were running a wedding photography business. And they got hit and they didn't know it. They got attacked. And, obviously it's a small 2-person wedding photography business in a small town in Kentucky. Why did they get hit? They got hit because a lot of their customers, unbeknownst to them, actually work for a defense contractor. And when they had their wedding pictures taken, this wedding photographer would put it on a website that they owned, so you could come and pick the pictures you wanted for your wedding album. And when you did that, they knew a lot of people did this at lunchtime from their offices. And so when they clicked, actually malware was deployed inside the defense contractor's environment. And that then kind of led to other issues that the defense contractor had. The point of this is, no matter how small or how large, there's no real, attackers aren't going to come after me because of whatever reason. You're probably going to be targeted at some point. So sorry.
There's no lack of devious geniuses in the world for sure. And that's a story that tells it. So look, from an assessment standpoint, to assess your maturity level, and here's where I want to finish out. There's really a couple different ways you could do that. There's a lot of free tools out there, right? NIST, has a pretty good, platform by which you can build a maturity level. But I think it really falls into 2 levels. There's really, I know my team and we've come out with a simple Excel spreadsheet based evaluation of, to assess for the needs of, let's call it the small operator, small business owner, just to get a basic understanding of that. But John, you and I have worked together on your C2M2 program. Why don't you talk a little bit about what C2M2 is, how it helps the client go through the NIST process and all of the areas that it encompasses and builds the big, good, better, bad list of categories.
So C2M2 is basically a model we took from the Department of Energy. It was originally developed to allow organizations to very quickly figure out their level of cyber maturity and cybersecurity maturity. And so it looks across 10 different categories, and it helps you rate where you stand in one of those categories and where you need to do work. The beauty of the model is it can be done really quickly. We run a workshop on it. But more importantly, it's non-technical. Even though it crosswalked or it supports things like NIST 853 or NIST CSF or HIPAA, the beauty of it is you could take the output of the model, go into a boardroom or an executive leadership session, and really get people to understand where your organization stands from a maturity perspective, and then prioritize that, develop a roadmap and an investment justification, and really speak to a language that executives understand without getting them all kind of wrapped around NIST 853 and controls and baselines and all the things that as cybersecurity professionals we need to know, but as leaderships in most companies do not need to know or want to know. So that's kind of what C2M2 is. We do have a process for it in a workshop. We'd love to help people with that. But that's kind of what it is. And we've had a tremendous amount of success with it because it is really a rapid way to understand where you are.
Sean, how much time does it take a typical organization to go through that process to really understand it? How much work is involved from their perspective to be able to get to the end result?
We run the workshop in a period of about 2 days, give or take. Because of COVID, we now do that in chunks over about a 2 to 3 week period because we do it virtually. And then once we have that done, let's say that's 16 hours, it takes us about a week to turn around the results. So you're probably looking at about all told, maybe 2 to 3, 4 weeks to get everything from start to finish. There's not a lot of prep work that organizations have to do. It's a pretty rapid model. And then we give you a good amount of output and guidance on what you need to prioritize and recommendations. So,
yep. So we're just about out of time. So, with that, Yasir, why don't you lead us out do you have any closing remarks, comments, ideas, anything you want to share before we head out and see where we go?
Yeah, I mean, we run into this all the time. SOC 2 or HIPAA compatibility or being compliant in your assessments is not a guarantee for security. Those are just subjective assessments based on a replay of information you provide your auditor. And especially with type 2 audit or ISO 27001, with the ongoing monitoring aspect of things, the controls around that, especially in the cloud era, that definition is changing, and we expect the new version of SOC, whenever that's out in the next few years, will have this around having automated controls, because you just cannot monitor some of these things. So let's not confuse some of these assessments with your security posture. I think that's the bottom line. People confuse that a lot, and that is no longer the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many I've gone through that you come down to a laundry list of priorities and a laundry list of dollars, and it makes people's head spin. But yep, I got it. But that's the world we live in today. And so, look, gentlemen, I want to thank you both. I know I find it invaluable when I get to talk to you guys and do that. So, and for everybody else out there, whether it's learning more about Sensato or Polymer, or or any way we can help you, we want to thank you for your time today. We would love to talk to you in any forum or any way, shape, or form. You have a lot of years of experience here from a cybersecurity and data center perspective, dare I say. So thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Feel free to reach out, and we hope to see you real soon. Yasir, John, thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.